Hello and welcome everyone to the Wellspring Wellness Forum. My name is Christina Hunter and I am serving as your moderator this afternoon. And we're so happy that you decided to join us today for this amazing program, this series that we've had all year long in connecting with different experts and people in the field and talking about how we can be well. We've covered a lot of different topics this year. And today's topic is so important and so on time as we're going to be tackling holiday stress. Yes, we are in the season, and it's usually a fun season, a happy season. We look forward to it every year once you get the decorations up and the music going. It feels good for most of us. But for many of us, the holiday season can tend to be stressful. Financially, it can be stressful. Mentally and emotionally, it can be really challenging. There are some of us that may not have the family to go home to or be struggling in other areas of our life. And holidays may not just be as fun as it is for others. So today, we want to be able to talk about that. We want to open up a little bit and get to the behind the scenes of what holidays may look like for some and what we can do to combat it. We're going to come up with different tips. We have some amazing presenters here this afternoon that are going to talk about how we can stay well and healthy during the holidays. So, I want to share with you just a couple little things here about the holidays. The Surgeon General this month issued an advisory that emphasized the rise in mental health challenges. And this is for everybody, but especially with young people. And as this world continues to live with the threat of this coronavirus pandemic, we have to be thinking about how we can stay whole during this time. We know that our bodies are not compartmentalized and that every dimension of our health impacts the other. So, mental wellness and physical wellness go hand in hand. And the Surgeon General's admonition cited significant increases in self reports of depression, anxiety, and lots of ER visits as it relates to mental health issues, with a sharp increase in suicide attempts, especially in our Gen Z populations. So, right now, families are grappling with how they can best care for their loved ones and themselves during this time. And we need to be continually reminded of how uncertain life can truly be. So, this afternoon, we want to help our families. We want to help each other achieve wellness. So, I want to begin first by just sharing a quick prayer, and then we'll go ahead and we will introduce our panelists. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just ask that you be with us this afternoon as we have this important discussion and keep us, Lord, as we go through the holiday season. Let it be a time of joy and peace and health. In your name we pray. Amen. So first, I would like to introduce one of our panelists who has been with us for the majority of this year. She's been a great addition to this forum and brings so many great tips. Dr. Susan Wolford Hunt. She's an associate professor in the Susan B. Meister Child Health Evaluation and Research Center in the Division of General Pediatrics at the University of Michigan. Her interests and clinical interests are in childhood obesity prevention and treatment. And her research has been funded by National Institutes of Health, focuses on new technologies to enhance provider patient communication, particularly with diverse populations. Dr. Wolford also serves as a co director for the Healthy Flint Research Coordinating Center, and in the role, she participates in a weekly seminar and webinar addressing pandemic related questions to help the community members make informed decisions to protect their health. So, welcome, Dr. Susan Wolford. Pleasure to have you. Next, we're going to introduce to you Marcus Youngbird. He is a limited licensed counselor at the Southwest Medical Clinic right here in Michigan in Stevensville, and he's affiliated with the Spectrum Lakeland Hospital. He is completing a PhD in counseling psychology at Andrews University, and he's lived in Southwest Michigan since the age of 6, so he's definitely a Michigander and understands the mitten. He's currently employed by Spectrum Lakeland as a counselor, and he is doing a dissertation that will likely focus on an area of trauma. And before grad school, he worked in various restaurants and loves to cook and try new foods from all over the world. Welcome, Marcus. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to introduce one of our professors here at Andrews University, Dr. Shannon Carton. She's originally from Tennessee. Now she and her husband call Michigan home. She works here in the social work department, and she's worked at the University of Tennessee and has a master's degree in social work with an emphasis in marriage and families here. Her practice experience includes medical, social work, grief and loss, public health with families and children, community counseling, and research and evaluation. Her passion is working with people who are aging and with people who have disabilities. And she and her husband enjoy spending time outdoors and volunteering for their church's children's ministries and in serving the community. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Chakart. And lastly, I'd like to introduce to you our special presenter for today, Dr. Marcia Neal Bedney. She grew up in the upstate New York, went to high school in 3 different states, and did her undergraduate studies in biophysics at Pacific Union College in California. She was then blessed to be able to attend Loma Linda University School of Medicine, where she obtained her medical degree. And Hinsdale Hospital in Illinois was her choice for residency and family practice. She married David Bedney during this residency and has subsequently enjoyed working in the field of urgent care. She's currently employed by Central DuPage Hospital, now part of Northwestern Medicine, and has been there for 28 years. Despite her lengthy tenure in medicine, she still receives her greatest joy from being David's wife and the mother of her young adult sons, Gerald and Gavin. Welcome, Dr. Bedney. We're so glad to have you. So, we are truly looking forward to the presentation that you have today as you're going to really hone in on what the holidays really could look like and what are some of the tips that we can really take advantage of as we think about this, just the different dynamics of holidays. And so we are excited to hear about your presentation today, Dr. Bedney.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Christina. I appreciate that introduction, and I also appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with the folk that are on this session. It's a delightful thing to be able to talk about holidays, and there are a lot of stress associated with holidays. Christmas is one of the bigger holidays that we have to navigate. And just to start off with, I'd like to just quickly make a definition. There are 2 types of stress. So we'll get our PowerPoint up and get that started. While that's happening, I'll just tell you that there are good types of stress called eustress, and there are not good types of stress called de-stress. So at the Christmas season, we can experience both types of stress. And even though it seems like there's a lot of happiness, that is still impacting our bodies in a stressful way. So my discussion today is going to be more or less an overview of a lot of the features of holidays and how we can more successfully come to the conclusion of the holidays and be grateful and successful. As you are all thinking about the past holidays that you've been through, there are a lot of different things that come to your mind. It might have been one holiday where you had a significantly huge credit card debt that you had to recover from, or maybe are still recovering from. There may have been family members that were at a holiday previously that are no longer with us that you have fond memories of. So we're going to go over just some bullet points, and hopefully that these bullet points will be something that will be beneficial to you. Even just maybe 1 or 2 of the points will be something that you might not have considered before, and we will be able to look back on Christmas of 2021 and see how we've been able to make some healthy changes. All right, so we'll move forward. As you see on this picture, there's the word holidays in the center of the screen, and that's going to form the framework for the information that I'm going to share. It helps me to keep things in an organized outline, and so I hope it's helpful for you as you think back on this talk when we're finished. So the first letter is H, and the H stands for have a plan. Now, the one thing that the marketers and the people that come into this holiday are hoping is that you don't have a plan, because the most haphazard and the most scattered you can be, the more likely they're going to end up making more money. So, as Ben Franklin has said, if you fail to plan, well, no, I'm sorry, it was our next slide. If you do not have a plan, then you're planning to fail. And this is something that I think we all have seen in the past. Especially at this type of season, you've got to think about what you're going to do with regards to the holidays, and you have to spend some time early on in the season to reflect about the holidays and what they mean. You have to look, and I do this, and I know that many of you already do this, but we're looking for ways to help and to love others in a meaningful way, and that usually means family and friends are going to get high priority in our plans. Their relationship is priceless, and we should never underestimate or exclude it from our plans. So you do have to do some significant organized thinking in order to bring them in a way that's going to be meaningful for you. You need to resist impulsive behaviors, and of course, we need to set realistic goals. As Christina said in the beginning, when we're talking about decorating, we need to think about how much we're going to decorate, when we're going to put it together, our meals, and maybe even planning ahead, freezing things, and also looking at our budget. But if you do all of these things at the beginning, it may be a little late for some. Some may have already jumped into this with both feet, but it is important for next year even to stop and really think through the holiday before you enter into it. Our next slide. Have a plan is followed by optimizing stress reduction. So holiday stress management is what we'll talk about this next slide. Holiday stress management. First of all, you want to slow down. We already just covered that. Managing your time wisely. Think through each day and put as much activity into that day as you think you can handle. Don't put more. Be aware. Be aware of your body. Are you tired? Are you needing more sleep? How about water? Have you been drinking the amount of water that you should? Knowing your limits. Energy, money, patience, stress. Knowing those limits is important, and you need to think, and I know I have to remind myself all the time to think about these things, because if you don't, it becomes like a domino effect, and you can just get busier and busier and spending more and spending more. So expressing your feelings, this is another big one, and I'm suspecting that there might be a panelist that can address this a little bit later on, but the expressing of your feelings means talking to family and not bottling up your feelings. And we're going to go backwards on the slides. We're not quite ready for those yet. Thank you. We're not bottling up feelings, and we're being honest. Everyone has had some family issue that they've had to deal with during the holidays. They can come out of nowhere. So it's important for you to make sure that you are honest with your family members. And we're going to go backwards on this slide. There we go. We'll stay right there. On physical activity, it's important to maintain some level of physical activity. And then lastly is having fun. Look for something to smile about or chuckle about during each day. And those things will be helpful in reducing your stress. All right, the L. L stands for loss and remembering. Now, this is the part that we're more focusing on this session. I don't know if that's just because this year and this year and a half have included so much loss. Everyone on this call Everyone on this stream has lost something. If it's not a family member, it's a friend, or it's a loss of normal. So we're all dealing with loss this Christmas, and this is a very significant um, feature of what we're having to deal with when it comes to stress at the holidays. The next slide shows several things that go along with loss and remembering. The first is to realize that you can and will get through the holidays. It's just a moment in time. You have to be gentle to yourself. If there's been a loss in your family, you need to protect yourself and give yourself time. You may not be ready to do Christmas the way you've done it in the past. Be kind and allow yourself to have a moment. Maybe you'll have to skip some of the activities that you've normally done. You may have to take some of the fun things and the happy moments that you remember and adapt them into a new holiday. Don't hesitate to reach out to someone that you trust or to a professional if you feel like you need some additional help with managing the holidays. I've heard some people find great comfort in recalling some of the fun things and the happy memories that they had with members of their family that have passed. They've also, given the social media milieu that we live in almost, making an online tribute to a loved one is another way that some people deal with loss. But the important thing is that you will get through the holidays, and there are lots of wonderful things around you that if you look for them and create new traditions and new things to rejoice about, especially with Christmas, because we are celebrating God's having sent his son so that we could go to heaven and experience no more loss and no more death. That's a beautiful thing about the holidays that we can continue to think about as we go through the trouble. Myself, my mother passed in January with COVID, and this is my first Christmas. And so I am very focused on dealing with loss at the holidays. So I can feel what many of you are feeling. And it is tough, but there's lots and lots of love that's out there from family members and friends that you can take advantage of, and that will make you stronger as you're continuing to wait to see your loved one again in the future, which is near future. All right, our next slide. After loss and remembering, we have introspection. Now, this is important. Introspection is important because it prepares us for the next year. The next slide shows what the definition of introspection is. And it's an examination of your mental and emotional processes. It's a look inward, self-examination and reflection. You think of your life's priorities and goals, and it helps you to be able to prepare for the next year that you're getting ready to go into. So when you're doing your introspection, you can be looking at things such as God's leading, the accomplishments that you've made in the last 12 months, the things that you've learned, the growth opportunities that you've accepted. In the business world, when they say there were opportunities for growth, that means that perhaps mistakes were made, but you can think those through and make a plan for the next year. And then being other focused. Some of the healthiest mental health tips involve reaching out to others, not to continually be thinking about your own welfare, your own climbing the ladder, but to reach out to look for those around you who are needing to have your assistance. I've put 3 texts at the bottom of this slide, and the texts have all the same focus, and they're from the Bible. The Galatians 5:14 says, "For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself." And the other 2 texts are similar. So reaching out and looking for other ways to share this season with other people can be extremely healing and helpful. The next slide you're not going to like. It's talking about diet. Now we have to go there. Everyone goes there every year. And I don't mean that you need to be on a diet. So you'll be glad about that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of medical background with regards to diet. And I hope that it'll be helpful for you as you go through this season. On the next slide, we have a picture. Now, this is a picture of a brain, and it's a little bit old-fashioned, but I liked it because it had the hippocampus kind of standing out, so you could kind of see where that is. Well, the hippocampus, and we're not going to move to the next slide yet, but this picture is where I'd like to stay for just a minute, because there is something that we humans use to decide how we're going to act. We function with basically two levels. One is to do things that are necessities, like food or sleeping or avoiding pain. But the other thing that's very powerful is rewards. We love rewards. We get rewards from things that motivate us. We get rewards from things that we learn, and we get rewards from things that feel good. I said feel good, and here comes the diet part. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that the hippocampus is responsible for memories, and it's also part of the reward system. Now, underneath that, you'll see dopamine. We unfortunately are very chemically oriented, and things float through our bodies and tell different parts of our body what to do. It's amazing. If you ever have a chance to look into the endocrine system, or to see the things that are floating around that are telling you, and you're thinking that you're making all of these memories and things on your own, but actually your body is helping you make all these memories. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. Food is one of the only things that involves all 5 of our senses. Now, if you think about that with me for just a minute, think about fiery hot Cheetos, all right? You're going to be seeing the yellow little small little crunchy thing. And I gave you a tip. The crunchy thing is the hearing. So you saw it, you heard it, you can taste it. It's very spicy and hot. Smell, I don't know. I've never had one before, but I imagine that if you could not smell, you would not be able to taste it well. So it has to have some type of smell impact. And then hearing it, you can hear it crunch, right? This can be true of an apple. It can be true of my favorite, and you don't have to raise your hand, but crunchy Italian bread, same exact thing. All right, now you take something that hits all 5 of your senses, and in your hippocampus, it's going to have a powerful effect. It will become a memory for you because it has been so encompassing in its interaction with you. You take that, and then you add an emotion to it, like your grandmother's kitchen, the boyfriend that shared it with you. You add an emotion to it, and it becomes even more deeply seated. It's called a food memory. We are all constantly making those food memories. And if you think about it, you've got a lot on your own. And that's where this becomes tricky, because your body, when your stomach gets empty, there are these neurotransmitters, which are chemicals, that go to your brain and say you're hungry. But there's also food memories that are satisfying. And sometimes, even though you're not hungry, you'll get a trigger that says, eat this because it will be rewarding, because you will remember all of the things associated with that food. All right? So when you eat a bag of Cheetos, that's one thing. But if you eat a bag of Cheetos and it triggers the fact that your first boyfriend gave you a bag of Cheetos, that's a very different thing. If you eat an apple, it's one thing. But if you eat an apple and you remember that you planted an apple tree in your backyard and you remember what the first apple from that tree tasted like, it's a very different thing. The dopamine that we are on the screen, the neurotransmitter, is released by sugary and sweet and satisfying foods, but it's also increased in levels in your body when when you are anticipating something. Now hold on, I hope I'm not going too fast. But if you're anticipating getting a cinnamon roll from Panera, your dopamine levels go up when you're still sitting in the car getting ready to go in. When you walk in and you smell the cinnamon rolls, it goes up a little higher. And then when you get it, the dopamine levels will basically plateau and they'll stay right there. But it was very satisfying, and your brain is remembering the walk in, the smell, you're remembering everything. Now, if you were to go in to Panera and the manager came and said, "You are our 100th customer and you get an entire dozen of the cinnamon rolls," your dopamine level would skyrocket because it was an unexpected treat. Now, the reason why I'm going through all of that is to say, and we'll move on to the next slide, when you are going through the holidays and you're thinking about food, you should first of all not try to lose weight. You're welcome. But you should plan to maintain it. But secondly, you should savor your favorite foods instead of resisting, because those foods have memories for you. And it's very satisfying to recall your grandmother's meatloaf or whatever. But if you resist, you'll be adding to your stress. It's better to take a little bite or to even make it and remember what it was like making it in her kitchen, and then taste a little bit. But savoring means leave it in your mouth. Think about the joy, chew slowly, and don't plan to eat an entire half of the casserole. Be mindful of portion sizes. Look for foods that are rich in fiber. And remember, these foods, even though they're attached to memories in your mind, they are really just food, and they are there for nourishment. Don't attach another job to the food. You can have memories, but food is food, and it does what it does, and it gives you nourishment for your life. So, and then of course, choosing time with family and friends over food is a very satisfying and stress reducing tip that I can give you. So the next slide, the next one goes into our A, which is activity. Yes, you do have to be active. And I live in Illinois, and I know it's cold outside. So you're going to have to think of something that you can do. Be purposeful in trying to get activity. Offer to walk the dog. But activity has very specific numbers that the next slide will show us. The 150 minutes is what is recommended per week of moderate activity. That would be brisk walking, biking, swimming, or mowing the lawn. Or 75 minutes of vigorous activity, which is like running, heavy yard work, aerobic dancing, or I'll say shoveling snow. You're also supposed to get training for your muscles. They recommend, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, 12 to 15 reps of each major muscle group of an exercise to strengthen that muscle group twice a week. And then reducing sitting time is important. If you sit all day long, you can pretty much not be proud of yourself with regards to your activity. In other words, it will work against you, even though you're getting your normal activity if you're sitting. So a lot of the Fitbits and things have standing recommendations, and that's what that's based on. So the rule of thumb is 30 minutes of moderate physical activity every day. Be creative. The next slide is showing us the year-end activities. And this is where you come into the New Year's resolutions. And there's a mnemonic that in the business world, some of you may have seen before. It's called the SMART goal setting. So the SMART goal setting on the next slide is, first of all, specific. The S stands for specific. So you're supposed to make clear and concrete goals and think of what you want to accomplish. The next is measurable. So you have to have a way to track the goal. These are numbers typically. The A stands for attainable. It should be achievable. It should be a realistic goal. And you can always adjust it later if you reach your goal too quickly, but it should be something that's achievable. The R stands for relevant. This needs to be something that you care about and that you want to do. It has to be related into your life, and it has to be something that can improve your life. And finally, T means time bound. It's got a due date or a deadline. All right, so we're going to leave it on this slide. I'll give you a quick example of that. A quick example means that you say you want to lose weight. You've got to lose it, and you've got a specific time frame that you're going to be losing it in. So that means that you're going to say how much you want to lose and by when you want to lose it in order to be specific. It has to be measurable, so you have to be able to measure your weight loss. It has to be attainable, so you're only going to lose 1 or 2 pounds a week. And for that time frame, you would probably give yourself about 6 months. Number of the relevant, it has to be something that you want to do for your health. It can't be because some other family member has told you to do it. It has to be something that you want to do because you want to be healthy, look better, whatever. And then time bound, of course, you want to give yourself an appropriate time frame. So the next slide is the last slide, and that's talking about safety. And safety in this pandemic world that we live in is usually going to be talking about the pandemic. So there are other things like not leaving your lights on overnight on a real tree and those things that you know about safety. But on this next slide, the safety features that we're going to focus on are COVID safety. So the first one is getting vaccinated or boosted. This is only fair to your body to give it a heads up on what it has not seen before so that it can mount an immune response. The next thing is wearing a mask over your nose and mouth. It's interesting that there's a lot of people that don't realize that COVID can go in and out of a mouth and a nose. So covering your face with your nose and mouth covered is how you're going to be helping protect yourself and others from COVID. The third thing is keeping your distance. That's about 2 arms length or about 6 feet from each other. It doesn't have to be exact, but the point is that you're trying to limit the amount of virus that can reach the other person. And this is the length that has been determined. I don't think there's anything that's completely accurate. It has to be 5 feet and 2 inches. It's nothing like that. It's just underscoring the fact that you should stay distant. The next is to avoid crowds and poorly ventilated spaces. Once again, we're just trying to keep the concentration of virus low. And so that's the reason why this is something that's recommended, just knowing how viruses behave. Testing, there's no excuse. Everybody can get a test now. So if there is a big function that you need to go to, it would be kind to the people that you're going to see if you tested to make sure that you were negative. The tests are moments in time. And it's not in the scope of this talk to talk about testing and what one is false positive, false negative, but just keep in mind all of these features are meant to keep you safe. Next is washing your hands. The next is covering your cough. You would not believe how many people in my office have actually removed their mask to cough because they didn't want to get their mask dirty. So that I can understand that, but it would be important for them to cover their mouth if they move their mask with their hands, put their mask back up, and then immediately wash their hands or put on hand sanitizer. Okay. Next is cleaning and disinfecting your highly touched spaces. And then last is monitoring your health. I've had a number of people that come into the office and I hear them coughing and sneezing, and I say, do you want us to do a COVID test while you're here? And they'll say, no, it's just my allergies. Though I've had so many that have been positive for COVID and thought it was just their allergies misbehaving. So just be honest with yourself. If you're not feeling well, then definitely wear your mask, consider getting a test, and then perhaps not even going to the function that you're going to. It's just fair and it's just kind and loving for the people that you're coming to. All right. So I think that's pretty much bringing my overview to a close. I'm leaving you here with the shepherds field below Bethlehem, looking up at Bethlehem, and just want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And I'll turn this back over to Christina.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bedney. Those were some amazing tips and breaking down the holidays, as you did, a great way for us to remember some of those really key pieces. Just even from the last piece of safety, when thinking about where we are with the virus right now, and you brought some really great tips of just some of those simple reminders of continue to be socially distant and sanitizing our hands and keeping our masks on. But I think about how that adds on layers of stress, right? Just the idea that we still have to do these things and we want to get together with our families, we want to connect with them, but we're still in this pandemic. What would you say to us of how we should deal with that type of stress, of the stress of even staying safe?
Yeah, I totally understand that. And we've never been in a pandemic before.
Right.
This is all new for all of us, and all of us are dealing with the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the scientists that are constantly studying all of the disease and its behaviors, they have families too, and they don't want us to be in this situation either. So they're working very hard to try to get the answers that we need, but they're giving us these safety tips. And we are, if we utilize those tips, we do have a better chance of being able to be with our families and to reduce our stress compared to the way we were last year, if you think
Sure.
about it. And
Mm-hmm.
every year, every month, we're getting some new information. So I think the main thing about that question, Christina, is, and it's great, is that we all have to just understand that we are living day by day, and that we're all in the
Mm-hmm.
same place together, that nobody is excluded from what we're going through right now.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
So I want to bring all of our panelists in, so we can just talk a little bit about some of these pieces that Dr. Benny brought to our attention as it relates to the holidays. And that first piece, and really kind of coming off of this last line, that we're all in this together. Um, how what do we say to those who just don't have that feeling? Loneliness is a big issue, not just with COVID, but just around the holidays. A lot of people deal with a sense of loneliness, and they may not have the family support or friend support that others may have. I would love for us to talk a little bit about, dealing with those feelings of loneliness, and how we handle that during the holiday time.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that's important to understand is that loneliness is not necessarily a lack of people problem.
Mm,
So, in fact,
mhm.
many people feel more lonely in
Okay.
relationships, right?
Mm.
So, loneliness is a lack of connection problem.
Ah, yeah.
And I really liked what Dr. Bedney said. Here's some things she listed. Allow yourself time for your feelings,
Mm.
right? If you need a year off, take it. Be gentle to yourself. Consider your favorite parts of the holiday, right?
Mhm.
So these are all ways of connecting with yourself, right? So, finding ways to connect with ourselves, I think, is equally as important as finding ways to connect with others and kind of combating and dealing with loneliness.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, that's really really powerful. That it's not a people problem, but a connection problem. I think that's something that all of us can kind of hone in on, and really think about, because a lot of times we do think, well, if I don't have friends, then that's what's contributing to my feelings of loneliness. But connecting with yourself is important. Um, Dr. Wolford, there's a physical component to feelings of loneliness as well. There was a 2018 study that was done by Cigna that found that loneliness was just as bad as to your health as if you're smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Hmm.
What would you say to the medical pieces of what does it mean physically when we are experiencing that lack of connection, whether it be with others or even with ourselves? How
Hmm.
does that manifest, and what can we do about that?
So I think it's so important, Christina, to remember this aspect of connection, not just with others or with ourselves, but I'm going to build on that connection and talk about the connection between the mind and body, right? The
Mhm.
two things go hand in hand. So if we have sadness, depression, anxiety, all of those things that are going on in our minds, those things are going to affect our physical health as well.
Mhm.
But the reverse is true. So if we are not looking after our physical health, and so we're run down and we're tired and we're feeling unwell physically, that's also going to make it very hard for us to be feeling comfortable and at peace mentally and spiritually. It's all connected. And so I
Mhm.
would say that we have to look after all parts of this if we want to experience that peace and joy during the holiday that we'd all like.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to remind everyone that is watching, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comment section. We'd love to be able to ask your questions and pose them to the panelists. Um, um, Dr. Carton, I think she has something that she'd like to add as well.
Yeah, it's just making me think about some of our older adults in our lives, right? And thinking about how COVID has impacted many people's ability to get out and be around others, the desire to stay safe, as Dr. Bedney was talking about,
Mhm.
the limited interaction with large groups, and the challenges that are faced when someone is getting older in general with travel and mobility and such. So sometimes isolation is something that can occur, but given our current circumstances, some people are facing even an um, additional isolation, if you will. And I think it's important for us to remember also to check in on people who are not present, who used to be present in our lives. And that doesn't necessarily mean inviting them to church or going to their home or something like that, but it might mean making a phone call, being intentional about having a Zoom meeting with your loved ones, being intentional about just making sure that they know that they're remembered as well, and
Mhm.
connecting in a way that's more than just physical, just more than being in the physical presence of someone, but just letting them know that they are important to you, and reminding them that you have noticed that they're not there.
Mhm. That's really, really good. And I just see a question here that just came up in the comment section. And it's asked by S. Rumi. Thank you so much for putting your comment in here and your question. Is there any mental exercises that someone can do to help with remembering a lost one or someone that they may have lost during the holidays? So you talk about people that may not be present in your life, but what about those who have passed on and are not there? We think about the empty chair at the family table. Many of us, I think a lot of us have experienced loss, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, even a child, uncle, aunt, friends, colleagues. What are some things that we can do to help deal with that?
I know for my family, having frequent conversations, even if you don't have a lot of close family, you can talk to friends too. But reaching out to discuss some of the things that made you laugh about that person and some of the things that they used to do, the quirky things. Some people might do recipes to try to remember those family members, and um, I guess it's just something where you need to reach out. Uh, if there's no person that you have that's close to your family, perhaps there's a member of the church or even a physician or someone that you can just talk to. Reaching out to discuss instead of just staying by yourself and thinking by yourself is really important. And that was another thing that I wanted to underscore was that being other-centered, I mentioned earlier, is just so valuable. I mean, if you really, really want to feel good at Christmas, try reaching out to somebody else who doesn't expect you to reach out and see what happens to how you feel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Anyone else have any comments on the grief and loss and how we deal with it? I think that was a great exercise, Dr. Bedney, of reaching out when we are feeling that sense of loss and connecting with another person. What are some other things that we could think about or do during this time?
I love the idea of the recipes because that's something that we have used as well. And we've lost a number of people this year. In particular, my mother-in-law passed away this year. And she was just the most loving mother-in-law that one could ever want. And she loved shoes. And every time I had a nice pair of shoes on, she would comment on those shoes. And so in just thinking about the things that she liked, like I will put on shoes that I knew that she liked, that she told me she liked, and just wear those because it reminds me of her and her love to me and the way she was so accepting and caring. And so I think that we can, as you say, the quirky things, the things that they enjoyed, keeping those things in our lives and reminding ourselves of those things can help us as we remember the loved ones who have passed away.
And I'll just add, I absolutely love it too that we're talking about recipes. My husband's grandmother passed away about a week before Thanksgiving this year. And after Thanksgiving, we realized that most of us had cooked her Thanksgiving roast, like pretty much all of us did. And it was just this awesome bonding experience that we had among the children and an opportunity to remember her and just celebrate the things that were so fun about her.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Those recipes make such a big difference. When you just smell it when you're going into a house, it connects you to that person. And I myself have very fond memories of baking cookies and making peach cobblers with my grandmother who passed away. And my daughter has picked up on the baking bug herself. And when she makes those things during the holidays, it just reminds me of her love. And that's such a wonderful and awesome way to remember someone. So now on the flip side, and I want to pose this to you all, we have, yes, the beautiful family memories, and then there's some of us that don't have such nice family memories. Maybe there are challenges in the home, perhaps divorces happening around the holidays for individuals, sibling rivalries and challenges, and there can be a large bit of drama sometimes that comes during the holiday season when we're getting back together with family and friends that we may not necessarily gel so well with. How do we deal with those pieces, leading up to those times when we have unresolved issues with family and friends that causes us a significant amount of stress? What are some of your thoughts on that?
I'm going to steal Dr. Bedney's suggestion, which is to, I think, have a plan. I think, in a lot of these cases, we can kind of predict, the nature of the relationships and dynamics that exist. And I think when you're caught up in the emotion, it's, hard to know what to do. But having a plan, I think, is really useful going in with, a strategy for what you're going to do if certain things come up.
December 23rd is not the time to start working on that. It needs to start January to prepare for the next December.
Yeah.
And reach out and maybe get professional help if you need it.
Yeah, so that's that introspection that you spoke about, planning for that following year.
Yeah.
And even, and I'm looking at something that Dr. Fisher put in the chat about, even how much time we should give ourselves to grieve a lost one, and what do we do when someone says snap out of it. So I'm thinking about, even with this family drama piece, everyone deals with things differently, right? So if we tag back in that grief and loss, for some people, spending a significant amount of time is important, while others say snap out of it. What's wrong with you? Get yourself together. You don't have time for this. So so we have these differences here, and those things tend to come up during the holidays. um, share, if any of you all can share some of your experiences with that, or some other tips that we may be able to give to our audience as they are thinking about this.
I would just like to say that many times when people tell us things like snap out of it, or it's been a year, hasn't this been long enough, or it's been 2 months, hasn't this been long enough, sort of thing. Sometimes people say those things because they're uncomfortable,
Yeah.
not necessarily because there's something wrong with the way that you're grieving. Grieving is different for all of us, and I I've come to understand that we don't get over losses. We reintegrate losses into who we are. They kind of go with us. They become a part of who we are. It is true that for most of us, they tend to sort of subside. But around the holidays, you often remember people that were special to you in those special moments that you had, or around celebrations, or around anniversaries, or around new births, or around marriages. You think about the people that were significant to you, and you may have kind of a grief reaction. But again, usually when people say that, it's because they don't know how to talk to you about it. They're uncomfortable, but it's not because you're necessarily doing it wrong.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, those dynamics and understanding the differences that we have, are it's good to be mindful of that, for sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Carton. Um,
The
yeah,
people,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just think that everybody grieves differently, and we all know this, but everybody does grieve differently. And so there's really not a good way to say that a person has had enough time and this person needs more time. And that really is where having someone to talk to, especially some people need a professional person to talk to customize your advice,
Mm,
the
mhm.
things that maybe it's taking a little long here, or maybe you're stuck in this place and maybe you're not. But that would be something very personal, and something that would need to be coming from a professional's viewpoint, who's been trained in knowing how to counsel people on that.
Mhm.
If you are still grieving and you don't feel that it's been long enough and you just need time, you have to be kind to yourself.
Mm, mhm. That's beautiful. That kind to yourself piece, Dr. Bedney, leads to this question that just came up in the chat, from Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for watching and for putting your comment in here. She asks, how can someone take a break from the comfort of staying home and not make time for self care? So, as you said, being patient and taking care of yourself. A lot of us have been really used to staying close, staying away from the drama, from the issues and everything, and isolating it. But is there significance to getting out, the connecting pieces, that self care pieces? How do we get out from there?
I think I'm not quite sure about the question.
Okay.
Um, I'm reading it, and it's, Sarah, you were saying, how can someone break the comfort of staying home and not make time for self-care? And that's why I don't quite understand what you were saying.
Let's see. I think perhaps it is the being in that comfort zone of home. It has been good for a lot of us, but I think maybe she's talking about that, kind of the barriers that are between us and others, or getting out to do other things to take care of ourselves. Whether it be, maybe taking that time for mental health, going to see a counselor, or going out to exercise, and taking care of health and nutrition. But we've gotten really comfortable on the couch. The pandemic has helped us do that.
Uh,
So how can someone get out and be able to pull away from that and see that as just as important as staying in your comfort zone.
Mm.
It's almost like saying you're stuck in a rut, maybe. Like you've gotten comfortable right where you are. I'm going to also refer back to Dr. Bedney's
Yes.
presentation.
Mhm.
And, something that has helped me when I feel like I'm stuck in a rut, when I know I'm comfortable where I am, but I really wish that I was doing something different to take care of myself, is I tend to do like a pros and cons list. What would be different? What's the pro of doing this? What's the con of not doing this? But I like the idea of the SMART goals, right? Making some goals that are measurable and attainable, that are specific, that are small enough that you can be successful, and just taking the first step. I think that's really practical advice, Dr. Bedney. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Bedney. Did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say, thank you for the clarification. And sorry, Sarah, I didn't get it the first time. But anyway, the breaking the comfort of being at home. Yeah, we have all gotten fairly used to being in our jammies and our scrubs and our relaxing clothes. But there is we've been created to be social beings. And although we can't force ourselves out, the reward when you do get out, you realize how much you missed being around other people. And so I think it just becomes a matter of just saying, yes, I could stay here. I could just live in this little space, but I am designed to be social. Number one, I have got values and I've got talents and I've got gifts that have to be shared with other people. And the only way that's going to happen is if I go out and start to mingle with them again. So I think that's just what I would say with regards to the staying home. And then the making time for self-care is just another one of those things where you have to be intentional. Our world can spin and it can go so fast and has such a frenzy that if you don't purposefully set aside time to take care of yourself, then you'll never get it. So you have to speak up for yourself by setting some time aside.
All right. All right. Now, I want to move us into another topic that's pretty important during this time that has a lot to do with things that we can't control. Wintertime. Wintertime happens to be a time where it's colder, especially in this side of the hemisphere, and darker. And there is something that many people have heard about, referred to as SAD, which stands for Seasonal Affective Disorder. And so, with the sun being scarce for several days at a time and it being dark and dreary, we have less vitamin D in our bodies. And I want to talk about how that affects us. What does that look like? How can we recognize that we may be dealing with symptoms of SAD? And what are some things that we can do about it? I'd like Marcus to speak on that a little bit if you can, and any one of the rest of our panelists.
Yeah, so I noticed about 3 years ago, I joined the group of people who start complaining this time of year about winter. And I was curious what happened because I used to love winter, right? Growing up, it was one of my favorite times of the year. And I started asking everyone I know, I'm like, do you like winter? And almost unanimously, they said no. And I'm like, well, what about when you were young? Loved it. And I thought about, well, what was different then? Well, we were outside all the time, right? We went outside all the time when we were young. So I looked into it, and what I found out is that even on overcast, kind of dreary winter days, it's about 4 times brighter outside than it is inside, right? So you're still getting significantly more light being outside, along with all the other benefits you get from being outside, right? I know we like to be warm and the cold can be intimidating, but it is possible to bundle up, get the right clothes and get outside. And the rare adults that I run into who enjoy the winter are the ones who, find themselves enjoying outdoor activities. So I think it's really worthwhile to get outside if possible. I know most of us have kind of 8 to 5 jobs. We're going to work and it's dark, and we're leaving and it's dark. And that can be hard. And the alternative, if you can't get outside, is they make lights now that kind of mimic what you're getting from going outside. You can use them in the morning, 15 minutes of kind of exposure while you're starting your day. So there's options if you can't get outside, but I definitely recommend getting outside when you can.
Yeah, those are really, really good tips. So what does it look like? Does it look like depression? Does it look like anxiety? How would someone know if they were suffering with seasonal affective disorder?
I think that's like asking a woman, what does PMS mean? It's the same kind of, I just can't put my finger on it, but it is a little bit of fatigue. You feel more tired in the evenings. You may get a little cranky. You don't have as much drive to get things done. Those are some of the features of seasonal affective disorder. That's why that sometimes it needs to be treated medically, and sometimes it can be helped with light therapy, like Marcus was saying. I'll just put a little plug in. I think I have seasonal affective disorder. I'm just confessing it right now. And I went and looked through Amazon and everything looking for lights, and I didn't like any of the prices. So I went to Home Depot and I got some of the LED lights that mimic sun. We have 4 light fixtures in our bathroom. I put a 6,000 lumen one in each of those lights.
Wow.
My walls are not warm. There's been no smoke, but boy, that room is bright, and that's how I get dressed every morning. And I actually like it. I don't. It's probably not working as well as it probably could if it was a therapeutic dose, but I really enjoy light. So just saying, that's a practical person with seasonal affective disorder.
That's great. That's a good tip. Yeah, and that's good for those of us who may not have access to the therapeutic lights. There are other options, and as I think it's just being aware and knowing that it can be something that can be helped.
Yeah.
I think is so very important. So very.
But I think it has a spectrum. So I'm not making light of it because I know that some people it really, really bothers, and they're the ones that really shouldn't feel ashamed to go and talk with somebody about it. But if you feel like maybe you'll have it, try some light and see what it does for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in addition to that, there's some other health challenges that come around the holidays as well. We're looking at a study that was done in 2018 that was published by the British Medical Journal that said that there was a 37% increase in heart attacks on Christmas Eve, and especially for older individuals. What are some of your thoughts on why that may be, and what are some things that we can do to be maybe proactive as we're thinking about some of those higher risks that may be occurring just physically?
So I think that is a phenomenal question, because while we think that the holidays should be full of joy and happiness, often they're full of stress. And so I think stress leads to a lot of problems. And we don't, particularly this Christmas with COVID around, we really do not want to be high stressed, right? We want our immune system to be in tip-top condition. And part of that means controlling the stress. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in relation to stress and the holidays is sleep, because this is really important to both adults and children. And nobody is getting enough sleep. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the vast majority of us are not. I looked up some stats about sleep and adults and parents specifically. And just over half of parents in the US say they lose sleep because of holiday stress. So we're supposed to be having fun, but half of parents are losing sleep because of holiday stress. About 2/3 of them say that they stay up too late shopping online. Now, we know it's not just parents, right, who are up late shopping online. And you go down a path and hours later, you realize you're still up doing this. And about 3/4 of them say they have less than 6 hours sleep on Christmas Eve because they're up preparing, wrapping, whatever it is that they're doing. And so with all of that, I think people are not getting the sleep that they need, and that this is adding to the stress that we have. And I like my little kitchen utensils. Last time it was a strainer. Okay, this time it is would you believe this is called a fat mop? And it is amazing. You think, well, it looks very simple, doesn't do much, but it does lots of things. You can use it to stir in a pot. You can use it to mop up the fat from a stew or a soup. You can use it to baste something. Very simple, but has lots of functions. This is like sleep. Sleep seems to be very simple, but it has lots of functions. While we are asleep, our brain is mopping up all of those toxins. Our body is mopping up all those toxins that would stay in the brain and getting rid of them. If we don't sleep enough, that doesn't happen as well as it should, and actually tends to lead to dementia in the long run. But we can't have the repairing happening. All of that repetitive activity can't happen if we're not sleeping. It does so many things. It controls our hormones so that we will eat better and make healthier choices. It controls our energy so that we'll go out and get that exercise outside. And it controls our mood so that we will be able to deal with those less than easy to get along with relatives. So just a pitch in there for sleep to help our health over the holidays and our immunity. And while I'm at it, can I tell you one other thing? Mm-hmm. The thing that gets a lot of us not to get the sleep that we want to get or we should get, I think, can you all guess what stops you from getting enough sleep? Stress may be one, but as a pediatrician, you might not be surprised. I think it's screen time. Screen time is just sopping up all of that sleep time that we should use. And I wanted to do this for any kids who are out there, because kids really are like, we just want to use our screens. And I just want to point out, if this is the time, if this bottle has the time in our day, this is the time in our day. And this little powder, little baking soda is screen time. Just a little thing, not a much. That looks very simple. It's so small in here. It gets into our days, and all of a sudden, gradually, it takes up all of our time if we are not paying attention to what it's doing. And if we really don't pay attention, it bubbles over. It just takes over all the time that we should be spending in sleep, relating with others, reading our Bible, whatever else. So I think one of the things that we need to think about over the holidays is how we control screen time. Don't let it push the sleep and everything else out of our lives, so that we can have a more balanced and happy holiday.
That is so valuable, Dr. Wolford White. And thank you so much for the illustration. It was very clear to see how screen time definitely does bubble over. I know it's not just kids. A lot of us too are in bed at night with the phone and the light just coming from there, and how that does really affect our sleep. So here's the big question that everyone wants to know. How much is too much screen time? How much sleep should we have?
Well, that's a great question. So how much sleep we should have varies by age. So if you are a teenager, you should be getting about 9.5 hours of sleep. I know every time I say that in a clinic, I have to almost run from the room, because kids are like, what in the world? We're not getting 9.5 hours of sleep. If you're a school age kid, younger than 12, you should be getting 10 to 11 hours of sleep. And it just goes up as you go younger. Adults should be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And we've all heard it said that it matters when you get that sleep. So it's not okay to, as teenagers would like to do, to stay up till 3 a.m. and then sleep till noon. It doesn't work as well with the hormones in our body. It's much better if we get that sleep at night. If you would go to bed and get a couple of those hours before midnight, that really makes a difference.
Mm.
And did you want me to answer the question as to how much screen
If
time?
you dare, if you dare. I know that's
How much
too.
screen time? So we recommend less than 2 hours a day of screen time. And if you're trying to actually lose weight, you would want to get that to be even less. But we want less than 2 hours of screen time. And that's all, not schoolwork screen time, but that's all the recreational. So that's the phone, the iPad, the video game, the TV, the anything else you might have that has a screen, all of that, 2 hours and less if you could make it.
All right, parents out there, you heard it. I know it's tough. As a parent with little ones, I know it gets really hard when you're busy and you need them to be quiet for a little bit. You hand them the tablet, you hand them the phone. But it definitely is something that we definitely need to be thinking about as we are trying to become healthier. I know Marcus, he had something he wanted to add as well.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put a plug in mentioning screen time. So this is my safe. And the way this safe works is that you twist it for a certain amount of time and you can't open it, right? So once the phone goes in and you twist the safe to a certain amount of time, there's no getting that phone back out unless you were to physically break this open, right? So this is what I use for myself to keep myself kind of guaranteed distance from the screen time.
Maybe some things that we would definitely need to invest in. I see a couple comments in there, including my husband, and saying that our kids are listening right now. They're asking for 3 hours. Please, can they?
Can I just put a plug in on that with regards to that too? Some studies were done with regards to the brain and screen time and social media, and they found that having the like button clicked on someone's site prompts the release of dopamine. Remember I talked about dopamine? So that's why screens can become a bit addictive, because they are rewarding us in a way. So I just put that in there for parents to think about too. Is you're limiting, if it were a drug, which it can act like, because the same chemical pathways are working in your brain, you wouldn't allow your kid to be around it enough to become addicted. So therefore, you should reconsider what time they get to spend with it. And not saying, I mean, I know I've watched children come into our offices, and over the years, I can remember when I would sew up a little laceration, we used to have this big cart with a TV, and we would plug in a VCR tape of Barney to let the child watch while they were getting sewn up. Now, the kids are like 18 months old and they know how to flip through screens on a phone. It's amazing how much technology has changed and how the kids have kept up with it. So it's up to us as parents to protect them from some of the things that otherwise they don't even understand how it's affecting them.
That's right. That's right. Someone did ask, where did Marcus get that really cool device from? And he said it is from its kitchen safe that you can purchase on Amazon. So I guess we're doing a little bit of product plug here for it. And also wanted to ask Dr. Carton, you mentioned there may be some apps that someone may use on their phone to help them with some of that screen time. Do you happen to be able to share some of those with us?
I don't necessarily know the names of the apps, but my husband uses one where right at, I think it's 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, his phone shuts off, and it doesn't allow phone calls. That sort of worries me in case there's an emergency. But anyways, it doesn't accept phone calls. It also turns off the notifications. I know for me, I have a hard time with that. Notifications will interrupt my sleep. But every now and then I'll mess up and leave notifications on, and I'll wonder why I'm not sleeping well, because that little ding or that little ping is interrupting my sleep. But these apps will turn your screen off, and then if you need to get into them, they ask you very specific questions like, are you sure you want to interrupt your, and it's like a game because you've made this much progress kind of thing. So, those behavioral modification techniques are really helpful to many people, like the SAFE or some of these apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one other piece that I wanted us to be able to discuss briefly before we begin to close here, as we're thinking about purchasing. And one of our watchers brought this up about Christmas shopping and the amount of stress that is caused by getting gifts. Now, you would think, as we've been talking about taking care of others and wanting to give to one another, that it would be something that would feel fantastic and help us feel good. But financial stress is one of the largest stressors when it comes to the holidays. And many people end up, just having so much anxiety, getting depressed, they're having financial troubles. So let's talk about that a little bit, the financial stress in the holidays. How do we combat that? Now, one of the things that this audience member said is that, she and her partner decided that they wouldn't give each other gifts, and that helped decrease their stress. That may work for some and maybe not for others, but what are some things that we can do to handle financial stress during the holidays?
Well, one thing is to plan.
Yeah.
A lot of credit unions and banks and different things have the ability to be able to set aside money in a savings account for Christmas time, or you can just be disciplined and do it yourself and set some money aside with the intention of being able to use that as you desire at Christmas. The other things that I know, I come from, my family is fairly small. I have a brother and a sister, and my dad, but my husband's family is very large. And so sometimes in years past, we've just done a name draw where you pick a present for one person, and that keeps it under control. And then the third thing would be to not feel that you have to repay people from years past. Gifts are supposed to be coming from your heart, and you're giving them to people that you have not been able to do anything for the rest of the year, and this is the time when you want to do it. You should be thinking about those things all along.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
I like the idea of being proactive as well. And it won't work for every family, I know, but sometimes it's helpful to have a conversation at the beginning of the year or even, way before the holidays about what you expect as a family. For example, my husband and his sister have made a pact that they will never get each other Christmas presents. They get each other presents, but not for Christmas because they don't want that obligation.
Okay.
But the focus is more on their children, and they do also have sort of a limit, like don't go beyond this kind of a thing. And again, that's got to be unique for every single family. But I think it's nice when you can be intentional and have a conversation so that, there's not that pressure to just buy something that really is meaningless sometimes, or to not know who to get something for. I know at Thanksgiving, I passed out just cards at Thanksgiving, and one of the people who received the card said, "Oh no, that means I have to get you one." I'm like, no, it doesn't mean that at all. It does not mean that at all. It's okay. And I hope they really understood that. But that gift giving thing has gotten really complicated in our society. So I like the idea of having intentional conversations.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any tips that relate to financial stress?
Yeah, I think this is just on top of the kind of planning aspect and I like the thinking about things early is like, look at your budget. Like, how much do you have to spend on gifts? And then write down who are the people I'm, going to need to get gifts for, and really kind of allocate, like I have this much money for each person, just so you do have a plan. Knowing what to expect creates a sense of security, which decreases kind of anxiety and worry. So yeah, just really getting into that planning.
And sometimes the nicest gifts are very creative. They don't actually cost much, but somebody made it for you, right? So that really shows how much they care and they love you. And so some of my favorite gifts are things that that have been made for me. Pictures. Once my niece and nephew made me a brooch. It was, homemade and beautiful. So I think we can think about being creative so that we don't always have to go into great financial expense for the holidays.
Absolutely. So planning, be intentional, be using our creativity and just knowing that it's just from the heart and not expecting anything else in return. I think if we're all able to do that, then that can help us with some of that stress. So I want to just now take this time to allow each of our panelists to just leave us with a final word as it relates to dealing with holiday stress and how we can maintain our health throughout the holidays. So I'll start with Dr. Carton, if she can share with us just her final words and thoughts.
Well, I really kind of have two things I would like to end with. Two things that are on my heart for personal reasons and just because clients or students have struggled with in these areas sometimes. But I just want to say don't be afraid to honor and remember your loved ones that have been lost during the holidays. And with that, I also want to say for those of us who may not have lost someone, but we know someone is going to be in our midst who's lost someone, don't be afraid to ask them how they're doing. Don't be afraid to talk about the loved one that they've lost because sometimes they may need permission to talk about it. So you can do it privately. You don't have to do it publicly, but just ask them, how are you doing? How are you doing this holiday? And then also, this is a big one. This is really important for me and for my mental health. Give yourself permission to skip social events. It's okay. You don't have to go to everything. Um, find a reason if it's really going to be difficult because sometimes there's a lot of emotion wrapped up into some of these events. And sometimes you just need a break and it's okay to take a break and don't beat yourself up for that. That's what I want to leave you with. Remember your loved ones and give yourself permission to skip some events.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Tricarton. Dr. Susan Wolford White, share with us your last thoughts.
Thank you so much, Christina. So we're talking about how to have healthy holidays. And I was discussing this with my husband before our session, and he quoted to me something from Ellen White as we're talking about health. And it said that it is important, that of the highest importance, that among studies selected for childhood, so among the things that we should teach children, physiology should occupy the first place. So I say that. So if our health is so important that we should teach children about it, we should build that into everything that we do for the holidays. So as we plan our menus, as we plan our shopping, as we think about who we will be around and not, we should really have God always first and our health central to our decision making. And I wanted to read a verse. We were reading some verses. You talked about how we remember people who we've lost, and I mentioned my mother-in-law who was memorizing many of the Psalms, and that's one of the legacies that she has passed on to us. And one of the Psalms that I wanted to draw our attention to is Psalms 127, where it says, "It is in vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late." Right? So all that we might be doing is totally in vain. But it goes on to say this, "For so he, God, giveth his beloved sleep." Whatever we are doing it with God. So we don't have to run ourselves ragged. If we do it with him, he will give us peace, he will give us joy, and he will allow us to sleep as we go through the holidays and try to celebrate. After all, we're celebrating God with us over the holidays.
Amen. Thank you for that reminder that we are with God and He gives us true rest. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Marcus, please share with us what are some things that you think that we need to remember during these holidays to maintain our wellness?
Yeah, so one thing I'll just leave everyone with, I think, in thinking about all these things that can be helpful and useful for us to do, I think it's important to also remember that none of us is perfect. We're never going to get it all right. I think it's Corinthians that says, "My grace is sufficient for you. Right? My power is made perfect in weakness." And we're all weak sometimes. We never do everything, that we could or should. So, in trying and failing and trying and failing, be kind to yourself.
That's wonderful. Remember to be kind. And lastly, Dr. Bedney, please share with us your final thoughts on maintaining our wellness during the holidays.
Okay, well, successful, healthy holidays start with recognizing the purpose of the holiday. It moves on into planning and being realistic with your plans and your goals. And then during all of that planning, it's best, and I know that I'm speaking for myself, that I focus all the while on God's love for each of us and sending his son to live and die here on earth. And because of that sacrifice on our behalf, we can look forward to living eternally in heaven, when in the near future, we'll be able to be in a place where there's no thought of sadness, no loss, no crying, no pain, and no death.
Amen. Amen. Well, again, thank you so much to all of our panelists who are here with us today for sharing your thoughts and your tips on staying healthy and keeping our mind on the right thing during this holiday season. Thank you all so much for being here with us. And I want to thank all of our audience members who have been with us throughout this entire year, participating in our forums every month. We hope that you've been able to experience, as we've talked about, all of the different things that we can do to stay healthy and maintain our wellness. So this is the end of the year. We're looking forward to a wonderful holiday. I want to wish you all a beautiful holiday season, a very happy new year. Continue to stay well, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Have a great one. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.